Welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me. There were some problems with the program, but it seems to be working now. Right, this is the 8th lecture in my course Purification, Ethics and Karma in Early Buddhist Discourse. First thing I'd like to mention is that the next lecture will only be on the 30th of June. We have 2 holidays in between, so the next 2 weeks there'll be only the discussion on the blog. Then another announcement I would like to make on behalf of the Center of Buddhist Studies of our University of Hamburg. We have just managed to have a MA, to create an MA in Buddhist Studies. This is mainly the work of the head of our department, Professor Michael Zimmermann. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that it is possible to get a Master of Art in Buddhist Studies at a German university. This is an important recognition of Buddhist studies. And it will start in winter 2012. And you can specialize, those who have a bachelor and would like to get an MA in Buddhist studies, could specialize in Indian, Tibetan, Chinese or Japanese Buddhism in a 2 years course. Then another thing, Venerable Dhammadasa on the blog had mentioned that when I paste in information into the chat giving the references, that for those who only listen to the audio files, this is not visible obviously, and I hadn't thought of that. So in future, whenever I give references, I will always make sure that I read them out loud. And those I gave last time, I just quickly go through them again so that at least these are available to everyone. The 4 references I gave last time as part of my discussion in regard to jhanas and the blog. The description of the first jhana in the Brahmajala Sutra. This is Digha Nikaya, volume 1, page 37. The reference that sound is a thorn to jhana. This is Anguttara Nikaya, volume 5, page 135. The story of Venerable Moggallana hearing sound while being in imperturbable concentration. This is in the Vinaya, volume 3, page 109. And the contrast between Jain and Buddhist conception of karma in the Jivaka Sutta. This is Majjhima Nikaya, volume 1, page 372. And the last one is that the precise fruition of karma is things that are beyond being thought out, the Acintayani. This is Anguttara Nikaya, volume 2, page 80. Yeah, last time I had I had given my point of view on a few of those controversies regarding jhana, the nature and attainment of jhana. And there has been quite some discussion on the blog about this. And I realized that there was one aspect that I did not cover last time, so I just like to briefly take that up. And this is the relationship between jhana experience and body. And I have here on the blackboard the description of the 3rd jhana. I read the first part. With the fading away as well of rapture, a monk abides in equanimity and mindful and fully aware, feeling pleasure. I have not translated the word, the Pāli is kayena. Feeling pleasure kayena, he enters upon and abides in the 3rd absorption, on account of which noble ones announce he has a pleasant abiding who has equanimity and is mindful. The term kayena, this is instrumental, has a specific meaning in Pāli. It's an idiomatic expression. And we get the same instrumental kayena, for example, as kayena pusati, to touch through the body, for the immaterial attainments. This is the reference I pasted in, and I will also say it aloud now. Madhyama-āgama, volume 1, page 477. Now the immaterial attainments, all matter is gone. Therefore there's not really any chance to touch with the body. And another reference in the same discourse a little bit later. Madhyama-āgama, volume 1, page 480, speaks of kayena sachikaroti. This is to realize kayena. And what is realized is the ultimate truth, nirvana. And there's also not much to be done with the body in nirvana. So we can understand that the expression kayena, when it is used in this instrumental form, has a specific meaning, and that means to experience something with one's whole being or directly. There's actually an excellent German translation that we can use, which is leibhaftig. Leibhaftig, Leib is still the German word for body, but leibhaftig doesn't give you necessarily this feeling of something being done with the physical body, but with one's whole being, one's whole experience. So the description of the third jhana, this feeling pleasure kayena, does not necessarily mean that this pleasure is felt bodily. It means that this pleasure is felt with one's whole being. But then, and here we continue, the Manfred on the blog had already pointed out that we get this whole series of similes for the jhana. And the text here is not so good. Let me just get it better here. There's some problem with the PDF display. Anyway, he makes the pleasure divested of rapture drench, steep, fill, and pervade this kayang. This is again, I have not translated, and you can't see it there properly. I think I just pasted in here below. Maybe then you can see it better. Just a second. Yeah, so it's here now in the chat. Here we have kayang, so the rapture pervades the kayang. It's no longer the instrumental. So that there is no part of this whole kayasa, also not the instrumental, unpervaded by the pleasure divested of rapture. That too is how a monk develops kaya gata sating. This is mindfulness directed to the body. So I think there can be no doubt that in this second part, to which Manfred had already drawn our attention, the physical body is meant. It is no longer this idiomatic expression, this instrumental thing, and the whole description of the experience of the four jhanas comes in the Kaya Gata Sati Sutta. I have given the reference here below. Madhyama-āgama, volume 3, page 92. And this whole sutra is about mindfulness of the body. If the jhanas were not at all related to the body, it would be completely meaningless to speak about them in that context. However, there are meditators and also meditation teachers who experience jhana as a purely mental experience and who say that the body has disappeared. How do we match this with this canonical description? And my personal feeling is that there is not really a conflict between these two positions. The reason I do not see a real conflict is that with the jhana experience, what we have is an experience of unification. The mark, the characteristic of the attainment of jhana is that everything becomes one. subject and object become one. In fact, this is how one can tell if somebody has attained genuine jhana, that whatever object somebody has, the normal way that this happens is that the mind replaces an object like mindfulness of breathing with the so-called nimitta, a light experience. But this is not necessarily the only way of getting into jhana. But the meditator, he or she will experience as if they are going into this light, or as if this light is engulfing them, going over them. And the whole point of this is that they are entering an experience of unity. Everything becomes one. The subject-object duality disappears. And when everything becomes one, then mind and body also become one. And then it is really, again, a matter of how you look at it. If you are looking at it from one side, as this has become one, it looks as if it is just mind. And if you look at it from the other side, it's body. You see what I mean is that there is not necessarily, as far as I understand, there is not necessarily a conflict between these two positions. Although, and that Manfred pointed out on the blog, that the canonical descriptions very clearly establish that the body is there. But the way the body is experienced in jhana is different from the way it is normally experienced, precisely because of this unification and because of the depth of concentration. And my point of bringing this up now was not only to conclude this little excursion on jhana and what is the nature of jhana, but also to again come back to this point that I already tried to make last time with this simile of me being in the water up to my neck and the head outside of the water, and then this difficulty of making this other gentleman understand that I am not in the water, not out the water. There's often we find there is a certain amount of gray area. And here I would like to, and this is actually the main point that I'm now getting at, I would like us to have a short look at Indian logic. You see, we have been brought up, most of us, with this notion of Western logic that there is just two alternatives, yes and no. Now, in Indian thought, we have a fourfold logic. This is something so puzzling that some philosophers even say that this is not logic at all. I'm not sure. To me, it's quite logical. So, yeah, this is the so-called tetralemma. And as you can see here, there are 4 different positions in the tetralemma. The first is something is. The second, something is not. This is what we know from Western logic. Now comes a third and a fourth. The third is and is not. And the fourth, neither is nor is not. It's rather curious, no? This tetralemma is not something specifically Buddhist. It seems to be generally known in ancient Indian thought. In the suttas, we often get this as a way of formulating the nature of a Tathagata, thus gone one, a term that stands for an arahant, but mainly is used specifically for the Buddha, with a few passages still having this more general sense. And we often get it that the non-Buddhists approach Buddhist monks or even the Buddha and ask how he formulates the nature of one who is fully awakened, the liberated one, the sage Can one say that after death he is or is not, or is and is not, or neither is nor is not? And the Buddha refuses all four alternatives because the premises of the question are wrong, according to him. But this tetralemma, this fourfold mode of predication, is not only used in the suttas by non-Buddhists, but also by the Buddha himself. And we find it especially among the fours of the Anguttara Nikaya. Very often something as said like somebody might harm himself, herself, or might harm others, or might harm himself, herself, and others, or neither harm him, herself, and not harm others. This basic fourfold kind of thinking is also used by the Buddha. And I personally find this extremely helpful as a way of approaching things. You see, when we clearly allow for these four different options, then we get quite a different worldview. At least this is what happened to me and to some with whom I shared this this mode of thought. We go beyond this very simple black and white distinction. We see that there is black and there is white, yes, but there's also black and white, number 3 in our options, maybe gray, and different shades of gray. And there's also 4, neither black nor white, all those beautiful colors, yellow, red, blue, whatever. And so we see that there are these if we approach situations with this fourfold logic, I find it very helpful, specifically when we are faced with someone who has a view that is opposed to our own view. See, if I say jhana is like this, and then somebody else says no, it's like that, then if I stand in this situation based on my perception of the black and white two type of logic notion, either he is right or I'm right. And because of that, I get this real feeling I need to defend my position now. I have to get at him. I have to smash him to make sure that his opinion is pulverized, so that my opinion is the only one that stands in the room and is right and correct. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but if we watch carefully when somebody contradicts us, it's very interesting. You get this feeling of being really attacked and needing to defend. But when we look at it from this fourfold logic position, there's much more space. There's no need to defend, because maybe he's right, maybe we are both right, maybe we are both wrong. It leaves a lot of openness, and I don't need to immediately react. I can leave some room there. And I find that specifically helpful in order to see also if the other person is actually receptive. Because we find, and here I speak specifically also about experience with other scholars, but I think it applies also in general. With some scholars it's very beautiful. You can have a very open exchange, and they put their views in a very open manner, like, you see, it seems to me like this, but perhaps, and it's very open, and so one exchanges views and ideas, and each learns from the other. But then with some other scholars, they put their views in a very strong manner. It's like this, I don't accept that, and it's it becomes so firmly established that it's clear that there is no real ground for exchange. There's, if at all a discussion will happen, it will just be a fight. And the person holding this view, it's part of their identity. View and a feeling of identity is something that goes very close together. So I am the one who holds such and such a view. And any topic coming up, then I have to manifest myself by putting my view in the middle of the room. This is Anālayo's view. This is what Anālayo has to say on this. This is what Anālayo thinks about that. Chung, there it is. And that's my identity. Don't touch it. I'm going to fight for it. I'm again exaggerating a little bit for the sake of entertainment. But yeah, we often find it. I have often find situations like that. And when that happens, it is pretty meaningless to start a discussion because it's not going to lead anywhere. The other person is anyway going to be full entrenched in their position, and there's not going to be any exchange on. So it's best to just accept that and say, yeah, fine, I see it differently, but doesn't matter. Yeah, I find this, and that is also what I was trying to do with the whole of the jhana discussion. I was not so much wanting to push down my views down your throat, but with a few instances like this, what I said today, and also the simile of the water, just show that different opinions need not be mutually exclusive. Yeah, that was the tetralemma. Then there was still a question open from one of the suttas, or maybe I should first ask if there is any question on the tetralemma, because to me this is a rather important point that really helps to deal with situations of views, being confronted with views of others, and having some less strong grasping at our own views. This obviously does not mean that I'm just going to ignore anything that contradicts my own views, saying anyway I'll be right, and that is not the point. It's just the point of helping us to stay less attached to our own views. Yeah, there's a question coming, I think. No question? Okay, then I continue. Now we are back on the topic of karma, and last time I gave an introduction with a few passages, and one passage has been discussed in the blog by several participants, and that was I just read it again, the passage on feelings from the Sīvaka-sutta. I read it one more time. Some feelings arise here originating from bile disorders, from phlegm disorders, from wind disorders, from an imbalance of the three, produced by change of climate, produced by careless behavior, caused by assault, produced as the result of kamma. Therefore, ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a view as this, whatever a person experiences, whether it be pleasant or painful or neither pleasant nor painful, all that is caused by what was done in the past. They overshoot what one knows by oneself, and they overshoot what is considered to be true in the world. Therefore I say that this is wrong on the part of those ascetics and Brahmins. Yeah, the issue was about what is these feelings produced by careless behavior. That was brought up by several, Laura de Bernardi and Andrea Feller. Yeah, so careless behavior is actually the translation coined by Bhikkhu Bodhi. And the actual term that we have there is Visama-pariharaja. I would be quite difficult for me to give a proper translation of that term. Visama is somehow uneven, disharmonious, somehow not quite right. And pariharaja is something that surrounds one or one is affected by. The Pāli text dictionary, Pāli text society dictionary translates Visama pariharaja as being attacked by adversities. And Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation as careless behavior is based on the commentary. In fact, he says that in a footnote to his translation. And then the commentary goes into like careless behavior and gives example of, for example, a snake or something. Getting bitten by a snake. And I just want to tell a little story that happened to me in Sri Lanka. We had been going to visit a very outstanding monk, Bhikkhu Jnanananda. He lives in a cave. And we had a very long discussion with him, and he's very intense. Like, you start discussing Dharma with him and the time flies. So it had become dark and we didn't have a torch, and we were 3 of us. So he asked one of the helpers there to get us down from the cave and down the hill. And it was a very, very small path where normally only one person can walk, and so this helper with his torch and the 3 of us really crowding around him, trying to go down this path. And the other 2 were quite inspired by the Dharma they had heard and were like discussing. But I had this feeling that I needed to digest what I had heard, and I just want to be quiet. And so I was very kind of just like quiet and keeping my eyes down in a kind of walking meditation mode. And just as we were walking down, I saw that there was a viper, and it was just lying across the path. And so in the last moment, I spread out my arms and I hit the others and stopped them. We were just standing in front of it, and it was a podanga, we call them in Sri Lanka, is deadly poisonous. And the normal way how they bite is precisely one steps on them. And this little fella was lying exactly across the path. It is impossible, I think, that not one of us, it's sure one of us would have stepped on it. And that was just a typical case, I think, where thanks to one of us not being careless, our karma of getting bitten by a snake did not come to fruition. I'm not telling this because that happened to be me. That was just chance that time I wasn't chattering. Next time I would have been chattering myself. But yeah, my 2 friends, they were completely quiet for the rest of our journey, all the way back to Kandy. It really hits you when you just one step before getting bitten by a deadly poisonous snake. And I think that's just a good example for the importance of being careful. And I think there's a basic setup that because of our karma of the past that we are now in this particular situation, but there is our ability to deal careful with that situation, and then we avoid certain things. I think it's just simply like that. And what I found a very important point made by Linda Grace about the discourse in toto, about the meaning of this discourse, she says, I understood the distinction in the example to be between something being the sole or primary result of past karma ripening in the present, karma vipaka, versus some careless activity in the more immediate present, being a cause of or a contributing factor to something else in the more immediate present. But the careless activity would still be karma. Yeah, and in fact here in the quote I highlighted, I put in bold that the position being criticized is whatever a person experiences, all that is caused by what was done in the past. It's this everything is due to karma view and other things are being excluded. This is I think what is being criticized. It is not meant that carelessness or carefulness is something that is not karma in itself, or I think the main point is that the passage is criticizing monocausality, a monocausal view, specifically of karma. Instead, we have a net of conditions that leads to the present situation. Karma is one of those, but the situation is not determined, and there are several things that influence it, and one of these is our carelessness or carefulness. Then the last thing to be reviewed is our discourse on the simile of the grain of salt. I just give the summary here again. Some deeds can have different consequences. Just as a grain of salt turns a glass of water salty, but not the river Ganges. Just as a poor thief of a goat is taken to task, but not the rich thief of a goat. Just as a poor debtor is arrested for owing little, but not a rich debtor, even if he owes much. Again, this is not the image of this grain of salt is not this is the only way to look at it and nothing else. I think Manfred had already clarified that on the blog. There was one question by Dania Percy. She asked, wait, I pasted it in here. If a monastic breaks a precept, is the karmic outcome worse than if the same action was committed by a layperson? And I think definitely yes. That was the theme of the other discourse that we looked at before, the heap of wood or heap of fire discourse. That these very stark images, better embrace a fire than embrace a pretty young member of the other gender, and better swallow a hot iron ball than eat the food offered by the faithful if you are not keeping morality. Is bringing out precisely that. You see, as a monk, I have on my own undertaken certain precepts, and I'm presenting myself to the public as one who upholds these. And people will respect me or support me precisely because they think, look, this is a monk. He is a celibate and he's doing this. So if I'm cheating, in reality I'm doing all kind of naughty things. This is karmically much worse than if I were to do the same things being a layperson and not making any claims. And there's another very useful, somewhat longer comment by Linda Grace that I like to share with you because I found it very, very helpful. She says, I think sometimes conditioned ideas of good person, bad person, reward, punishment, causality in simplistically linear terms, etc., can cloud our investigation and understanding of karma. For myself, I find it helpful to see creating karma as a stepping stone, stepping into a process, so to speak, that has been set in motion and will have its inevitable consequences, resulting in happiness or suffering. So I want to take as much good care as I am able to, given my awareness at any given time, in terms of what I step into or set in motion or take up. But also to see that both the action and fruition, whether immediate or far into the future, happen within a matrix of conditions, and that a variety of mental inclinations and intentions, as well as other physical and verbal actions, are part of and constantly influencing that matrix. Not only will unwholesome action eventually ripen, but that action is also strengthening the underlying unwholesome tendencies, motivating it. So it becomes like a feedback loop. There's something missing here. And then it's also easier and more likely to repeat a similar action which deepens the current of suffering, so to speak. I think that's a very nice description of this, of the best way to understand it as like a flexible thing. The discourses we are going to go through now are going to put different highlights on different aspects of karma. And none of them is just like, this is the one principle and we only look at this and forget about all the rest, but they all kind of interweave and combine to give us the main idea of what, according to early Buddhist thought, is happening. Yeah, so now getting into the next discourse. This is Madhyama-āgama number 12. Discourse to Vappa. The parallel to the Vappa-sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. This is Discourse 195 among the fours in the PTS edition, volume 2, page 196. And in this discourse that we are going to look at now, we are going to meet one of the two chief disciples of the Buddha by the name of Mahamoggallana. Venerable Mahamoggallana, together with Venerable Sariputta, are reckoned the two chief disciples of the Buddha, and according to what we know from the Theravada commentarial tradition, the two had been friends already before they went forth, and they had been practicing under the same teacher, somebody called Sanjaya, whom we also meet in the Brahmajala-sutta as one of 6 outstanding teachers contemporary to the Buddha. And in the Brahmajala-sutta, he is portrayed as somewhat of a skeptic, perhaps, not taking any position. And then there's the story that Venerable Sariputta one day, while he was walking in Rajgarh, he met a monk, one of the early monk disciples of the Buddha by the name of Asaji. And he asked him, he was impressed by this monk and asked, well, who is your teacher and what is he teaching? And he just got a single stanza and became a stream enterer on hearing this stanza. And he went back and told Moggallana the stanza, and Moggallana also became a stream enterer. And so they both decided to leave their teacher Sanjaya and ordain under the Buddha. And the story actually goes that they took all the disciples of Sanjaya with him. And Moggallana is said to have become an arahant after 1 week, and Sariputta after 2 weeks. When Moggallana apparently had some problem with drowsiness, there is a discourse addressed to him on drowsiness before he became an arahant. And he apparently also had some problem in clearly recognizing the level of jhana he is in. He gets instructions by the Buddha in this respect, and it is the same Moggallana that we met with the last time, who, according to the Vinaya, had been sitting in Aninja Samadhi, in imperturbable concentration, and apparently shortly emerging from that attainment had been hearing sound of elephants and had not had this clarity of recognizing that at the time of hearing he was actually not inside the 4th jhana. And Venerable Moggallana in the sutras stands particularly for this power of concentration. He is the master of supernatural powers. Early Buddhism believes that on developing concentration up to the 4th absorption, it is possible to develop all kinds of supernatural powers, to levitate, to walk on water, dive into the earth, touch the earth and moon, touch the sun and moon, etc., change one's shape. And some of these instances are actually already found in the early discourses, so we cannot dismiss these supernatural performances as something that was just added by later tradition. Although it is true that the later the text, the more supernatural phenomena we will get, and eventually the Buddha and the monks just keep flying from one place to the next. But some of these supernatural performances are already found in the early discourses. And one of them is that Moggallana, he offers to, when there's a famine, he offers to turn the earth upside down. There is supposedly a savory essence under the skin of the earth that they could live off. And he's also said on one time there was a monastic building with some monks that were not very mindful, and so to shake them up, he is said to have shaken the whole building with his great toe. He does the same also with the palace of a god, the king of gods that he goes to visit, Sakra or Sakka. He also shakes that palace with his toe. Yeah, and he is said to have passed away before the Buddha. And the story that we get from the commentarial tradition is that he was in the habit of visiting hells and reporting how people were reborn in the lower realms. And so he was also telling that the followers of non-Buddhist religious tradition, when they got reborn in hell, and so their disciples were not particularly happy about that, and out of revenge decided to send somebody to kill him. And the story goes that he was able to escape, but eventually one time they got him and he was beaten up to death. Yeah, that is what the commentarial tradition gives us in terms of information about Venerable Mahamoggallana. So now we come to the discourse itself. I read again. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying among the Sakyans at Kapilavatthu in the Nigroda Park. Sakyans is the clan from which the Buddha himself comes, so he is in his home country. At that time, after the midday meal, the Venerable Mahamoggallana was sitting in the assembly hall together with a company of monks for some purpose. Then a Sakyan by the name of Vappa, a disciple of the Nigantas are the giants, a disciple of the Nigantas, wandering around afternoon, approached the Venerable Mahamoggallana and after exchanging greetings sat down to one side. Then the Venerable Mahamoggallana asked this visitor about this matter. What do you think, Vappa? If a monk is restrained in body, speech and mind, do you see any possible cause owing to which unwholesome influxes might arise, leading to future existence? The influxes we discussed in the discourse on all the asavas, and the point of this discussion that is now going to come is about the different conceptions of these influxes, these asavas, in the Buddhist and the Jaina tradition. And in the Anguttara parallel, the way Venerable Mahamoggallana describes this, he adds, and I think that makes it more clear, that the person he is speaking about is an arahant, is somebody who has eradicated ignorance. So the question he is asking is, what is the situation for the arahant and these influxes? And Vappa gives the reply according to the Jaina tradition view, as it is being reported in Buddhist discourse, and I read again. Mahamoggallana, if a monk is restrained in body, speech and mind, I do see a possible cause owing to which unwholesome influxes might arise, leading to future existence. Mahamoggallana, if someone has done unwholesome actions in previous existence, then owing to that unwholesome influxes will arise, leading to future existence. So that is the view that Vappa proposes. Now the Buddha is, according to the Madhyama-āgama version, he has heard this conversation with his divine ear. The divine ear is one of these supernatural powers that, according to early Buddhist meditation theory, one can develop based on the fourth absorption, and which allows one to hear sounds at a very far distance. So the Buddha joins them and now he first establishes a basic principle of discussion. He says, "Then the Blessed One said to Vappa the Sakyan, a disciple of the Nigantas, if you agree with what I say, you should say yes. If you disagree, you should say no. And if you have any uncertainty, you should ask me further thus, Renunciant Gotama, how is this? What is the meaning of this? If you can accept what I have just proposed, I could discuss this matter with you." So the Buddha is kind of opening up the room for questions, but also asking him to either agree or disagree. And if Vappa agrees with this basic principle of discussion, then the Buddha will continue, and Vappa agrees. And so the Buddha explains, suppose that a monk in the past gave rise to unwholesome bodily activities, unwholesome verbal activities, unwholesome mental activities, unwholesome activities based on ignorance. But at a later time, he ceases unwholesome activities of all these four types. Creating no new karma and having abandoned old karma, in this very life he attains the goal, and free from vexation remains permanently and unchangingly in this condition, which is spoken of as something to be seen by noble wisdom and to be known by noble wisdom. What do you think, Vappa? For a monk who is restrained in body, speech and mind in this way, do you see a possible cause owing to which unwholesome influxes might arise, leading to future existence? And Vappa admits, he replies, Gotama, if a monk is restrained in body, speech and mind in this way, I see no possible cause owing to which unwholesome influxes might arise, leading to future existence. The Buddha continues, Vappa, it is just like a shadow that exists in dependence on a tree. Suppose that someone comes with a sharp axe and chops down the tree at its root, cuts it into pieces, then breaks each piece into 10 or 100 fragments, burns them in a fire so that they become ash, which is then blown away by a strong wind, or carried away by water. What do you think, Vappa? That shadow existed in the dependence on the tree. So once the cause of the shadow has been cut off, will the shadow disappear and not arise again? Vappa replied, Indeed, Gotama. Vappa, it should be understood in the same way in the case of a monk in whom ignorance has been extinguished and knowledge has arisen. With ignorance extinguished and knowledge arisen, when there arises the feeling of the body nearing its end, he knows that there has arisen the feeling of the body nearing its end. When there arises the feeling of life nearing its end, he knows that there has arisen the feeling of life nearing its end. And when the body breaks up and life ends, the lifespan having expired, then all that is felt in this life will be exhausted and come to an end. It should be understood that it will end and become cool. Vappa, a monk whose mind has been rightly liberated like this attains 6 wholesome abodes. What are the 6? Vappa, on seeing a form with the eye, such a monk is neither pleased nor displeased. He remains equanimous and unaffected, with right mindfulness and right attentiveness. Similarly, on hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on experiencing a touch with the body, on cognizing a mental phenomena with the mind, he is neither pleased nor displeased. He remains equanimous and unaffected, with right mindfulness and right attentiveness. The Anguttara Nikaya parallel has a different sequence of these textual pieces. It first takes up the topic of the Arahant and future existences. Then it mentions the 6 abidings, the 6 states of remaining equanimous and unaffected to anything that happens at the sense doors, and only then comes to the simile of cutting up a tree. As I had mentioned earlier, this is the common occurrence in orally transmitted literature, that we get a relatively similar text, but somehow the sequence is jumbled. And yeah, I don't have any particular argument for one sequence being better than the other. So we continue with the discourse. The discourse concludes with Vappa approving, and he makes an illustration of his former faith in the giants that is similar to raising a bad horse, expecting to get benefit from it, and then he takes refuge with the Buddha. Now, Buddhist discourse is not 100% reliable source for the views held by others, but I think therefore the main point that this discourse gives us is not so much what precisely is the jhana point of view on the asavas. I think we can leave that as a secondary thing, but the main point is, from a Buddhist perspective, somebody who has reached full awakening here and now in this very life is already beyond the influxes. He or she is not beyond karmic retribution. A famous example is the Angulimala story of somebody who has been a murderer but was converted by the Buddha, became a monk, became an arahant, and he was, whatever karmic retribution for his former evil acts was still due to happen in the same life, he had to experience that. But by becoming an arahant, not being reborn, he had cut off the possibility to experience any retribution in future lives. That is not the point here. The point here is that an arahant has done with what is unwholesome. That is gone. The influxes are eradicated once and for all. And this point, I think, is important insofar as some Buddhist traditions develop later on the idea that there is an arahant who can fall away from his attainment, the parihana dharma arahant. And there are a number of passages that one could take from the early discourses that would show that this is a later notion from the early Buddhist viewpoint, and this is not only Theravada, this is what we get from the Pāli Nikayas and the Chinese Agamas, etc. An arahant, one who has become an arahant, has eradicated all unwholesomeness in the mind, and there is no falling back from that condition. He or she might lose concentration attainments. Maybe they have gotten some jhanas and they get sick and can't attain them anymore. That's a different question. But as far as influxes are concerned, that taints the asava, this is done and for good. Yeah, if there are questions, then now is a good time. Otherwise, I'm already getting the next discourse. I have to apologize for the PDF display. I have not been able to sort out this problem. There is some reason, as you can see here now. The PDF is perfectly fine. It says MA13, but it somehow matches this. The display here and the connect mixes these things up, but yeah, I hope you can live with that. So I think there is one question coming. I wait a little while. Just as a question from Linda Galash, just a question about a phrase in the text. When body breaks up and life ends, is it of particular importance that the body first breaks up and then life ends? No. That is just a standard expression. Kayasa bheda parang marana is the Pāli counterpart, and they both refer to the same thing. This is just the style of the discourses. This is actually good that you're mentioning that I can comment on that. We often get repetitive phrases like this one, Kayasa Bheda Parang Marana. It would be enough to just say Marana when life ends, or death, or to say Kayasa Bheda, the body breaks up. But the style of oral literature is such that something is not said once but said 2 or 3 times. Like, you don't say it's beautiful, say it's beautiful, really lovely, absolutely delightful and enchanting. And in a written document, this looks a little odd, but as I'm talking to you, if I just say it's beautiful, but if I say it's beautiful, what did I say? Absolutely delightful. I forgot what I said. But if I use all these 4 terms, the point that I'm making now in an oral situation, talking to you, becomes it sticks more in your mind. And the same for later transmission. If I am learning a passage that has this, what did I have? Beautiful, delightfully, enchanting, absolutely wonderful. Then even if I forget one of them, I still have the other 3. And the main point that is being said in the passage is not getting lost. So there's a tendency of repetition, which is typically for oral literature, for literature that is born in an oral context, and that has been passing on in an oral setting, to make the same point repeatedly, to make sure that one gets it. The person has passed away, but there's no intention to say that the body breaks up first and life ends after. There's no statement about at what point life is precisely at its end. The two are meant to be contemporary. So now we get into Madhyama-āgama 13. Excuse me. Discourse on tenets to be transcended. This is the parallel to the Titthāyatanāni-sutta. This is the 61st discourse among the 3s of the Anguttara Nikaya, Pāli Text Society, Volume 1, page 173. And I read again. Thus have I heard. At one time the Buddha was staying at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. That is the main setting of many discourses, Jeta's Grove in Savatthi. At that time the Blessed One said to the monks, there are 3 tenets to be transcended, tenets held by those of different affiliation, different appellation, different school, different doctrine. You just notice what we're talking about? Different affiliation, different appellation, different school, different doctrine. It's again this saying it 4 times, make sure you really got the message. I continue reading. Which, despite being well accepted, firmly held, and declared to others by so-called wise men, are not beneficial. What are these 3? The numbers are given by me here. There are renunciants and Brahmins who hold this view and declare all that a person does is caused by what was done in previous lives. And the next one. Again, there are renunciants and Brahmins who hold this view and declare all that a person does is caused and created by a supreme divine being, a creator God. And the third. Again, there are renunciants and Brahmins who hold this view and declare all that a person does is without any cause or condition. These are the 3 main views that the Buddha, that this discourse is going to be discussing. So the first is everything is because of the past, is a kind of karmic determinism. The second is the affirmation of a creator God. And the third is the denial of causality. So the discourse continues by describing how the Buddha approaches each of these renunciants and Brahmins, and he first asks them if they really hold this view. That's actually a very nice procedure we get in the discourses. Even when somebody is accused of some offense, a monk or a nun, the Buddha will call them to his presence and first of all make sure, is that true? Have you really done this? Have you really said this? There's always this awareness that, particularly in an oral setting, what other people tell you so-and-so has done might not be really what they have really done or what they have really said. So there's always this step of, first of all, hey, did you really say that, or did you really do that? And then only the punishment, explanation, counter-argument starts. But in this case, these recluse and Brahmins, they say, yes, this is our position. So now the Buddha questions them, and here we are with the position number 1, the position on karmical determinism. And the Buddha says, I say to them, if that is so, venerable friends, then you all endorse killing living beings, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and so on, up to wrong views. This is an abbreviation of the 10 karmapata, the 10 unwholesome courses of action. They comprise these 3 physical actions: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, 4 types of unbeneficial speech, and 3 final times is greed, ill will, and having wrong views. Continue with the sutta. Why is that? Because all of that is caused by what was done in previous lives. Venerable friends, if the view that all is caused by what was done in previous lives were true, then it would follow logically that all that one does or does not takes place without desire, without effort. So the position he's basically taking is that if everything is caused by the past, then I have no responsibility. I kill, I steal, and I had to, you see, it's all because of the past. View number 2. If that is so, this is the view on a creator God. If that is so, venerable friends, and we get the same argument, then you all endorse killing living beings, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, false speech, and so on, up to wrong views. Why? Because all of that is caused and created by a supreme divine being. Venerable friends, if the view that all is caused and created by a supreme divine being were true, then it would follow logically that all that one does or does not takes place without desire, without effort. So the same argument is used also against the idea of a creator God. And then view number 3, the view that there are no causes and no conditions. If that is so, venerable friends, then you all endorse killing living beings, etc. Why? Because all of that is without any causes or conditions. Venerable friends, if the view that all is without any cause or condition were true, then it would follow logically that all that one does or does not takes place without desire, without effort. So here, if there are no causes and conditions, then I'm also not able to assume, then there is no responsibility for my killing, etc. And I think for view 1 and view 3, the case is very clear. For view 2, I think it works only if we have a conception of a creator God that is all-powerful and completely in control. But there are notions of a supreme divine being that creates living beings, but then lets them act according to their own wishes and responsibilities. And such a view of a creator God would not be the one that is being targeted here. Yeah, the formulation in the Anguttara Nikaya parallel of this argument is similar, but has a somewhat different wording. And the Anguttara Nikaya concludes each refutation by the Buddha by telling that the Buddha tells these renunciants, you cannot, if the view you hold were true, you cannot even be properly called renunciants, because just as you are not responsible for killing, you are also not responsible for being a true renunciant. All that a person does. Let me just go back here. Yeah, another small difference is that when he discusses all these views in the Madhyama-āgama, he calls them as not beneficial, and in the Anguttara Nikaya it said that these views establish the notion of non-action, akirya, and I think that is the argument that he is making in all these three cases. Holding these three types of views, one is not inspired to take action, one does not take responsibility, and this is basically why he wants to criticize them, and now he presents his own teaching as a contrast. The Dharma I teach to you, which I have known and realized by myself, cannot be refuted, cannot be defiled, cannot be prevailed over by any renunciant Brahmin, God, Mara, Brahma, or anyone else in the world. The six sense bases, the six elements. He's going to explain these now in the Anguttara Nikaya. Also the Four Noble Truths are mentioned in this announcement, and as we come to them later, that makes sense. And the Anguttara Pal also mentions the 18 mental explorations. We can leave these aside, they are based on the six sense bases. So I continue with the discourse. Because of the combination of the six elements, there is rebirth from a mother's womb. The six elements are the earth, water, fire, air, wind, earth, water, fire, wind, the four material elements, space, and consciousness. Consciousness here stands for the whole mental aspect of a living being. It's consciousness, vijnana, has several different roles. Sometimes it's only one of the aggregates, but at times it stands for the whole of the mind of a living being. So these elements, the material elements, space and consciousness combined, they are the basic ingredients for a living being. Because of their existence, there's rebirth from a mother's womb. Because of the six elements, there are the six sense bases. I might have mentioned them already, that beside Buddhism considers mind as a sixth sense base alongside the 5 physical sense bases. And because of the 6 sense bases, there is contact. And because of contact, there is feeling. Some of you might know that we are getting here a little bit into dependent arising. Monks, one who has feeling will be able to know dukkha as it really is, know the arising of dukkha, know the cessation of dukkha, and know the path to the cessation of dukkha as it really is. Here we get into the Four Noble Truths. What is knowing dukkha as it really is? It is this. Birth is dukkha, old age is dukkha, disease is dukkha, death is dukkha, association with what is disliked is dukkha, dissociation from what is liked is dukkha, not getting what one wants is dukkha. In brief, the 5 aggregates of clinging are dukkha. This is called knowing dukkha as it really is. This is the first of the Four Noble Truths. Now we get the second. What is knowing the arising of dukkha as it really is? It is craving for and clinging to future existence, with delight and desire, seeking after this and that state of existence. This is called knowing the rising of dukkha as it really is. I just note that the second noble truth formulation in Agama discourses does not mention the 3 types of craving that we get usually in the same definition in Pali discourses. Craving kama, bhava and vibhavatana, the craving for sensuality, for becoming or existence, and for non-becoming or non-existence. The next, the third, what is knowing the cessation of dukkha as it really is? It is the cutting off without remainder, abandoning, disgorging, fading away, cessation, stopping, and disappearance of this craving for and clinging to future existence, with delight and desire, seeking after this and that state of existence. This is called knowing the cessation of dukkha as it really is. What is knowing the path to the cessation of dukkha as it really is? It is the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, and so on, up to right concentration. These 8. This is called knowing the path to the cessation of dukkha as it really is. Monks, you should know dukkha as it really is. You should cut off the arising of dukkha. You should realize the cessation of dukkha, and you should cultivate the path to the cessation of dukkha. If a monk knows dukkha as it really is, cuts off the arising of dukkha, realizes the cessation of dukkha, and cultivates the path to the cessation of dukkha, then that monk, having abandoned all influxes, having loosened all fetters, is able through right attentiveness to attain the end of dukkha. This is what the Buddha said. Having heard the Buddha's words, the monks were delighted and remembered them well. Yeah, in the Anguttara Nikaya parallel, the discussion of the arising and cessation of dukkha instead presents the 12 links of dependent arising. This is just a different mode of presentation. The Four Noble Truths are one of the 2 main topics of next year's course. Therefore, I'm not going to say anything more on them, though I have quite a few things to say on them. It's a little bait to get you into my course next year. And another thing from the comparative perspective, that this final injunction, monks, you should know dukkha as it really is also not found in the Anguttara. So the main points of this discourse is to criticize 3 views: karmic determinism, then the idea of an almighty creator God, and the denial of causality, and instead present insight into the Four Noble Truths as the Buddha's teaching and as the appropriate kind of perspective. Yeah. If there are questions, then please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I would go on to the next discourse. Just maybe briefly summarize that this the vision of the Four Noble Truths is different from these other. The right view of the Four Noble Truths is different from these other 3 views, inasmuch as it basically presents an analytical approach that can even be used to Buddhist views themselves, I think. The basic point behind the Four Noble Truths, now I'm starting to talk about what I shouldn't be talking about, is that we take responsibility for our dukkha by seeing that we are contributing to that situation through our own craving. So it is a kind of a psychoanalysis of views, or a medicine to be applied, a medical perspective. In fact, the basic pattern of the Four Truths is based on a medical scheme of diagnosis to be applied to views, instead of making proposals of the type everything is due to past life, or there is a almighty creator God who is having everything under his control, or there's no causes or conditions. Yeah, I find it difficult not to get into the Four Noble Truths. They're so interesting, but I think I should keep that for next year. Next year's course will be on the Arahant and the Four Truths. So we will get a lot of chance to discuss the significance of the Four Noble Truths at that time. Yeah, so the next discourse we are getting into is Madhyama-āgama number 14. It's a discourse given to Rāhula. This is the parallel to the Ambalaṭṭhikā-Rahulovāda-sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 61 in the PTS edition, volume number 1, page 414. Rāhula is the only son of the Buddha, and tradition says that he was born on the day on which his father left the household life. And other traditions differ with this a little bit. Doesn't matter. The story is that the Buddha, after his awakening, he came to visit his hometown, and his former wife sent Rāhula with the message that he should ask his father for his inheritance, for his heritage. And the Buddha got the boy ordained. Which, the father of the Buddha then said to have made a plea that in future, please don't ordain these young kids without getting permission from the parents. And the discourse, we are meeting Venerable Rāhula now. According to the commentarial tradition, he is 7 years old at this time. And he is, as we're going to see shortly, he's going to get an injunction against falsehood. And there is a story behind this that we do not have in the Pāli commentarial tradition, but it is found in the Vinaya of the Mula Sarvastivada tradition, the Vinaya Vibhanga, and also in a work called Mahaprajñā Paramita Shastra or Upadesha Shastra. So these two works tell us that young Rāhula, who was still a young boy, was sometimes fooling around a little bit, we could say. So when visitors were coming and asking for the Buddha, he was giving them the wrong information. If he was in one place, he would tell them, oh, he's in the other place, and then have his fun on seeing them walk all the way to the other place and not meeting the Buddha. Or the other of these two texts says that when the Buddha was there, he would tell the people, no, he's not there. Or when he's not there, he would tell them, hey, he's there, just go, and then have a laugh when he sees them not meeting the Buddha. And according to these works, then this appears to be the background why the Buddha is now giving him an admonishment that even this joke, fun making, speaking falsehood for fun is something that is a rather grave issue according to Buddhist analysis. So I read the discourse. Thus have I heard. At one time the Buddha was staying at Rājgā in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. At that time the Venerable Rāhula was also staying at Rājgā in the hot spring grove. Discourse continues with the Buddha going begging in the morning, goes for his alms round, and then comes back to visit Rāhula. And as is custom in those ancient days, they were walking barefoot, feet are dirty, so Rāhula, it's a customary gesture that when somebody arrives, you bring him some water so they can wash their feet before they sit down on the seat, because otherwise sitting down cross-legged on the seat, the dirty feet will make everything dirty. So he's washed his feet, and then he sits on the seat that the Rāhula has prepared for him, just some cloth put out for him, the Buddha. Now I continue with the discourse, get some similes now. 1. Then the Blessed One took the water vessel, and having poured out the water until only a little was left, asked, Rāhula, did you see me taking this water vessel and pouring out the water until only a little was left? Rāhula replied, yes, I saw it, Blessed One. The Buddha told Rāhula, in the same way, the practice of those who knowingly speak falsehood, without embarrassment or regret, without shame or scruple, is of little worth, I say, Rāhula. There is no evil they would not do. Therefore, Rāhula, you should train yourself like this. Even in jest, I shall not speak falsehood. Now we get a second simile. The Blessed One again took the water vessel containing a little water, and having completely discarded the water, asked, Rāhula, now again, did you see me take this water vessel containing a little water and completely discard the water? Rāhula replied, yes, I saw it, Blessed One. The Buddha told Rāhula, in the same way, the practice of those who knowingly speak falsehood is completely discarded. I don't give the full passage here. Says every time the same thing after these similes. Then the third simile. The Blessed One again took the empty water vessel, tipped it over on the ground, and asked, Rāhula, now again, did you see me take the empty water vessel and tip it over on the ground? Rāhula replied, yes, I saw it, Blessed One. The Buddha told Rāhula, in the same way, the practice of those who knowingly speak falsehood is tipped over. And the fourth simile. The Blessed One again took the tipped water vessel and, having turned it bottom up, asked, Rāhula, did you see me again take the toppled water vessel and turn it bottom up? Rāhula replied, yes, I saw it, Blessed One. The Buddha told Rāhula, in the same way, the practice of those who knowingly speak falsehood is turned bottom up. Yeah, the water similes in the parallel, in the Majjhima Nikāya parallel, Majjhima Nikāya 61, are a little different. We have the little water left in the vessel, the discarded water, and the vessel upside down, but we do not have a counterpart to the empty vessel. Yeah, I find, let me just see, the little water makes sense. There is too little for washing. The thrown away water also makes sense because you can't use it, and the tipped over jug also. But the empty vessel, in that context, the Buddha sitting down, having just washed his feet and using just what he has there as a very practical illustration to this young boy to illustrate something. The empty vessel as such is not as useless. It still gives an illustration of the vainness and hollowness of the life of a monk who, even a young monk who speaks falsehood. Anyway, I'm not wanting to take position. I'm just saying, I mean, the other three really strike me as fitting the context very well. Now we get another simile. Rāhula, it is just as if a king had a great elephant who, when going into battle, uses his forefeet, his hind feet, his tail, shoulders, back, flanks, neck, head, ears, and tusks. Everything except his trunk, which he keeps protected. Seeing this, the elephant trainer would think in this way. The king's great elephant still cherishes his life. Why so? Because when going into battle, the king's great elephant uses everything except his trunk, which he keeps protected. Rāhula, if when going into battle the king's great elephant uses also his trunk, if he uses everything, then on seeing this the elephant trainer would think in this way. The king's elephant no longer cherishes his life. Rāhula, if the king's great elephant when going into battle uses everything, then Rāhula, I say that there is no evil that the king's great elephant would not do. According to the Pāli commentary, the point of this passage is that the elephant is no longer scared of his own life and is therefore able to defeat the enemy. I continue with the Madhyama-āgama discourse. So too, Rāhula, those who knowingly speak falsehood without embarrassment or regret, without shame or scruple, Rāhula, I say that there is no evil they would not do. Therefore, Rāhula, you should train yourself like this. Even in jest I shall not speak falsehood. We get some verses here not found in the Pali version. He who transgresses this one law against speaking falsehood, not fearing the next world, there is no evil he would not do. Better to swallow an iron ball, burning hot like fire, than to transgress the precepts while accepting the offerings of the faithful. You might remember this simile from our discourse on the heap of wood or heap of fire. If you fear dukkha, not even wishing to think of it, whether secretly or openly, perform no evil deed. An unwholesome deed, already done or being done, can never be escaped. One cannot hide from its result. Yet the first two of these stanzas are found in the Pali Dhammapada collection, Dhammapada 176 and 308. Having uttered these verses, the Buddha asked Rāhula further, "What do you think, Rāhula? For what purpose do people use a mirror?" The Venerable Rāhula replied, "Blessed One, they wish to examine their face, to see if it is clean or not." Similarly, Rāhula, if you are about to perform a bodily action, then examine that bodily action. I am about to perform a bodily action. Is this bodily action pure or impure? Am I doing it for myself or another? Rāhula, if on examining it you know, I am about to perform a bodily action, and that bodily action is pure, either for myself or for others, it is unwholesome, has dukkha as its fruit, and will result in the experience of dukkha, then Rāhula, you should abandon that bodily action that you are about to perform. As you might have noticed, there are some very stark contradiction here. Bodily action that is pure and unwholesome. I have written on this in that paper on the Madhyama-āgama, which you can download on the OLAT webpage. I think it's unquestionably totally clear that this is just a translation error. The reading should be that bodily action is impure. It is unwholesome, has dukkha as its fruit. I'm not going to discuss this anymore because we are running out of time, but there's just a very obvious error in the Chinese version. We have found several quotes of this passage. All of them agree with the Pali version. So the two versions agree in recommending reflection for the three types of action, the bodily, verbal, and mental. If we leave out this translation, or it would be a translation error. Before doing something with the body or speech, check if it's pure, and if it's impure, don't do it. While we are doing something, acting or speaking, check again, and if it's impure, stop right on the spot. Only continue if it's pure, and after it's over, still reflect again. If it's impure, then as a monastic we should confess it. If it's pure, we can rejoice in it. In the case of mental action, if we are involved in some thoughts or fantasies, and we realize we are getting into that, check again. Don't do it if it's impure. While it's happening, again check, and stop it if it's impure. And if we realize we've gotten into it, and it has been impure, then we are ashamed of it. If it's pure, we rejoice in it, ashamed or abandoned. And the point of being pure, both versions explain that this means that this is wholesome, skillful, and it has pleasant karmic results. Yeah, I think I still go through the rest. If you give me 5 minutes more, maybe next time we'll cut 5 minutes short, because it would be a shame to drop off the rest of the discourse for next time. Rāhula, whatever renunciants and Brahmins in the past have, in the future will, in the present do, purify their bodily, verbal, and mental actions. All of them repeatedly examine and repeatedly purify their bodily, verbal, and mental actions in this way. Rāhula, you should train yourself like this. I too shall repeatedly examine and repeatedly purify my bodily, verbal, and mental actions in this way. And here we get, again, the Madhyama-āgama gives us some verses by the Buddha. Bodily action, verbal action, mental action, Rāhula, whether wholesome or unwholesome by nature, you should constantly examine them. Knowingly to speak falsehood, do not do it, Rāhula. Shaven-headed, you live of others. How could you speak falsehood? Overturning the law of renunciance, empty without truthfulness, such is speaking falsehood with mouth unrestrained. Therefore, not to speak falsehood, O son of the rightly awakened one, this is the law of renunciance. Thus you should train, O Rāhula. Prosperity and happiness all around, safety and fearlessness, Rāhula, to attain that, do not harm others. This is what the Buddha said, and having heard the Buddha's words, the Venerable Rāhula and the other monks were delighted and remembered them well. Yeah, and here just I have put again the main points, the illustration of falsehood with little water left that cannot be used for anything anymore, like discarded water, the vessel tipped over, the vessel upside down in the Madhyama-āgama, the empty one in the Majjhima Nikāya, and the reckless elephant. And then we get this simile of the mirror, which illustrates the need to reflect on bodily, verbal, and mental action before, during, and after. Yeah, that's it for today, what I had to offer you. I've been going through 3 discourses this time. There's some time for you to digest and discuss all this. The next lecture will only be on the 30th of June. We have 2 holidays in between. I like to mention that again. But then from the 30th onward, we will continue without further breaks. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that one or the other of the things that I have been presenting to you today have been of some interest, if not for me, at least for the beautiful similes and the teachings that we have been looking at. So wish you a nice time until we meet again.